Here in Hida, Takayama in Gifu Prefecture, celebrating a special occasion. And as you can see, I have some non-conventional clothing on, and that's because I am wearing sort of hotel loungewear, which is very common here in Japan for many of the traditional hotels. Generally, sort of all of the Japanese hotels have some sort of loungewear, as it is a very common tradition. So if you come to Japan, you're likely to find that in your hotel. So while at this hotel, I made an observation that I wanted to present to all of you and get your perspectives on it. And I know that it may not go over well, but I think it's worth talking about. And that is onsen. And if you're not familiar with that, that is basically hot spring. That's the Japanese term for the word hot spring. So in the West, we would recognize as hot spring or spa. Onsen is a deeply rooted Japanese tradition, and it really goes back to over 1,200 years. And when you go back to Japanese history, beginning in the 8th century, there were records that have been discovered of onsen. And some of the oldest onsen are not far from where I live. So there's Arima Onsen in Kobe. But generally all of the prefectures, but some are more noteworthy than others, are very popular for onsen. In addition to Japan's cultural history, there are also some natural factors that contribute to why onsen are so popular, and that's because Japan is a geologically active country with earthquakes and volcanoes, and so that naturally lends itself to the types of environmental conditions that are conducive to onsen. So, for example, steam deposits that are rising from the Earth's crust and heating the water, that has really made it quite convenient or accessible for Japan or many Japanese resorts to be able to leverage that and turn it into onsen. There's also the social and cultural aspects to onsen in Japan, and one beginning in Shintoism. And so Shintoism is a connection to nature, and I mentioned that in one of my previous YouTube videos, and the significance that carries in Japanese culture. And so it is believed that onsen is really an opportunity to purify oneself. And so when you talk about waterfalls, for example, or lakes, onsen translates naturally in the Shinto aspect. And then you also have the aspect of mythology, and so it's believed that the spirits, that many of the gods also used onsen to purify themselves. And so that's another key aspect of onsen culture here in Japan. And then there are also the personal, social, and communal aspects to onsen. So Japanese are known to bathe daily. Many Japanese do bathe daily, which contrasts in many Western cultures, and there are various reasons for that. One, again, given the history that I mentioned to you, but then number two, in Western culture, there's also some of the actual kind of local conditions. Sometimes water is quite expensive, and so it would be very expensive to bathe every day. And as many of you know, even washing your clothes every day, you have to be mindful of water consumption. So therefore, in the West compared to Japanese culture, bathing is not quite prevalent. And of course, there's also the preference by many Westerners for showers. But here in Japan, it's different. And then there's also the communal aspect. So onsen is an open air bath typically, or a closed facility bath where other people are enjoying the hot spring or the facilities. In recent modern Japanese history or pre-modern Japanese history, onsen became quite popular because there was really the prevalence of public bathhouses, and this had socioeconomic factors. Many Japanese, because the homes are small, could not afford or accommodate a large bathtub inside their homes, and so public bathhouses would be available for them to be able to enjoy or again, carry out many of those cultural pillars of purifying themselves. And so this also spans socioeconomic status. You had people of wealthy backgrounds down to people with lesser income or lower income backgrounds, all congregating in these public bathhouses. And that's where we are today. Then there is the business component to the popularity of onsen. So following World War II, there was a great period of economic prosperity and development in Japan, and that contributed to the modernization of infrastructure, including roads, highways, and then the train network. And Japan has a very comprehensive rail network, including Shinkansen. So that really opened up opportunities for these regions to promote their onsen and also create hotels and resorts around those onsen experiences. And for Japanese, due to economic prosperity, it was an opportunity to get away from their local towns and be able to venture to the various regions of Japan to enjoy onsen. And then moving on to TV and internet, that opened up things even further, where even those who are not native to Japan or tourists could learn about onsen and be able to make that part of their travel experience. And so one of the reasons I brought this up is because I've been at this hotel one day so far, and I went to the onsen last night before dinner. And that was really good because I had a full day out here in Hida, Takayama, doing some touring, and it's nice to be nice and refreshed. And so I went to the onsen, and what I noticed was that there were no foreigners in the onsen, and there are quite a number of foreigners here. One, obviously the Japanese yen is currently not that strong, so it is very attractive for foreigners to come. But what I did notice is that there are none, I did not see any inside the onsen. And here I am this morning, early morning actually, and I did not see any foreigners inside the onsen. Now, there could be various reasons for that. I do wake up very early, so maybe I'm ahead of when many foreigners might wake up and consider going to the onsen, but I just thought I'd call it out. Now, there's some other factors at play that might govern why Westerners don't attend onsen. Obviously, coming to Japan from the West is quite a trip, and just to be able to see many of the highlights and attractions of Japan, experience the culture, the food, that's a trip in and of itself. And so maybe onsen doesn't rank as a high priority for many foreigners who come to Japan. And then there's also the sentiments toward public nudity or public bathing. And so for many Westerners, it's very uncomfortable, public nudity, or actually in some cases, there's resistance to it. And so that would contrast with the Japanese mindset or approach, where public nudity, particularly in onsen, is an acceptable norm. And then there's also the level of comfort, and that ties back to my previous point about how comfortable one feels being around others in a public place nude. That's the short of it. And so that could be a lot of what explains the really lack of presence of foreigners as far as I've seen in onsen. And then even before dinner, I haven't seen any foreigners dressed like this, wearing, again, this sort of yukata or kimono, depending on how elaborate it is. And so again, it could just be just the differences between Japanese culture and Western culture that really limit, again, the opportunities or maybe even the willingness for some foreigners to try this out and feel comfortable. But that's, a personal preference, of course. Now, one of the things I say when people come to Japan is that you have to try onsen. I feel like it's a self-care thing. Now, obviously, self-care can be interpreted in a few different ways. And then there are the therapeutic benefits to onsen. It's been said and studied that onsen does have some healing effects, and this goes back to Japanese ancient history, where the belief was that there were therapeutic benefits to onsen in terms of healing the body, and then just again the personal belief that onsens are therapeutic in terms of being able to just relax, de-stress, have some time to decompress. And that's what I believe as well, and that's why I enjoy onsen so much, is because it's just a chance to I guess call it self-care. I really look forward to onsen. You have the opportunity to, one, enjoy the facilities, the hot water, and just the overall process or ritual of onsen. And so there are many videos covering the ritual and the process of onsen if you don't know how it works. And speaking from my own experience, I first came to Japan in 2010, and I experienced my first onsen in Hakone, and I did not have it on my itinerary to experience onsen, but one of the things to be mindful of is when you're staying at a smaller Japanese hotel, typically the hotel owner, they do have connections to local businesses that run onsen if the onsen is not inside the hotel itself. So you don't want to come back and be asked, hey, did you go to the onsen, and say, yeah, well, I'm not quite comfortable. It might just, again, send the wrong message culturally. And again, it's a personal preference, but just something to be mindful of when you do visit Japan. Now, in terms of the overall process, I'll tell you, if you're not comfortable with your body or not comfortable with public nudity, you are going to garner maybe some double takes by local Japanese. And the reason being is because you don't see many foreigners inside onsen. But then also, maybe the concern is that you won't follow the typical Japanese etiquette. And that's very important, particularly in onsen, because Japanese are regarded as a very clean culture. And so there are things that you just don't do inside onsen. One, you don't bring a smartphone, because obviously you don't see any footage of me inside the onsen or any footage of the onsen itself. But the other thing too is you don't wear underwear or other clothing inside the onsen. The reason being is because the detergents or potentially dirt from those clothes can contaminate the onsen water, which obviously is not good for anyone. So my advice is, when in Rome, when you go to an onsen, and if you don't know what to do, play it conservatively, just follow sort of what others are doing. And usually the good thing about onsen is that there are signboards that give you the steps in terms of how to behave inside of an onsen, or what the etiquette is for an onsen. One of the other big questions that people have is whether you can go to an onsen if you have tattoos. And it's really sort of a mixed answer, because a hotel like this, tattoos are probably okay because it is a very large hotel and there aren't local staff monitoring who comes in and out. And so if you have a tattoo, it's fine to go to the onsen. And the reason why there is a resistance to tattoos or negative connotation is because of Yakuza, which is a Japanese organized crime syndicate. And that syndicate has had a long history in Japan, not obviously a very favorable history, and many Yakuza have tattoos. But again, back to the question, if you do have tattoos and you go to an onsen town or a small hotel that has onsen, you should check with the hotel beforehand to see if tattoos are okay. There are hotels that have a very explicit policy about tattoos, and because of the tourism boom here to Japan, there is much greater acceptance of tattoos inside onsen, and much more than when I first came to Japan back in 2010. So I just wanted to sort of share that with you, get your thoughts on it. Again, I know that it's not for everyone, but I just thought I'd call it out because here I am traveling, and yeah, I didn't see many foreigners, and there's really nothing to worry about. If you are traveling to Japan and are wondering about whether it's something you could do and whether it would be a smooth experience, it's totally fine. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching this video, and be sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video soon.